how the Super Bowl came to be, and oh baby, what a spectacle it has become. It's hard to believe a sporting event can be so impactful as to predict the rise and fall of the stock market. There is a 77% accuracy rate that, depending on which team wins, will predict if the stock market rises for the year or falls. In America's 240-year history, there have only been 51 Super Bowl games played. Yet, the Super Bowl is the single most watched sporting event in the history of Western civilization. I would like to share with you the fascinating facts of how the Super Bowl game was created and what has made it a spectacle today. I saw my first Super Bowl game when I was 9 years old. Sitting in my living room, I watched Super Bowl XX1, which showcased the New York Giants versus the Denver Broncos. The following year, my favorite team, the Washington Redskins, were in the game, and Doug Williams beat the Denver Broncos. The historic part of the game was that Doug Williams was the first African American quarterback to start a Super Bowl and also the first to win a Super Bowl. He was named the game's most valuable player. Yet the most memorable Super Bowl for me was Super Bowl XXV. My father was fighting away in Operation Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf. Grammy Award winner Whitney Houston sang the best rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner ever. It still gives me chills to see her sing, and the flags flying in the stands and the F-16 flying over the stadium. It helps to be a football fan, but you don't have to be to enjoy the Super Bowl and all that it entails. I would first like to rewind and introduce you to two American football leagues that existed independently of each other: the National Football League and the American Football League. They both coexisted in the 1960s. Secondly, why and how the two leagues merged to make one single league we know today as the NFL. And that would take the Super Bowl game to new heights. Lastly, I will share with you great moments and performances that have made the game super. The origin of professional football can be traced back to 1892, with William Pudge Heffelfinger's $500 contract to play in a game for the Allegheny Athletic Association against the Pittsburgh Athletic Club. From 1892 until the National Football League was formed in 1920, several amateur teams formed, and some of the best players on those teams received money to play football. On September 17, 1920, a group of men gathered in Canton, Ohio. The result of the meeting was the birth of the National Football League. The league was first known as the American Professional Football Association, later renamed the NFL in 1922. It was also in 1922 the league hired its first league president, Jim Thorpe. Thorpe was hired to bring credibility to the sport. The NFL started with 11 franchises: the Akron Pros, Canton Bulldogs, Decatur Staleys, Cleveland Indians, Dayton Triangles, Hammond Pros, Massillon Tigers, the Muncie Flyers, the Rochester Jeffersons, Chicago Cardinals, and Rock Island Independents. Only two of the original teams are still members of the NFL. The Decatur Staleys relocated to Chicago and became the Chicago Bears, and the Chicago Cardinals are currently the Arizona Cardinals. By 1960, the NFL had gone through dramatic change, but was stronger and more popular than ever. Although it still trailed baseball in popularity, NFL owners were happy and content with the condition of the league. The league had grown to 13 franchises in 13 cities. Teams like the Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings, New York Giants, and Washington Redskins, just to name a few, were part of the NFL in 1960. In 1958, the National Football League championship game with the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants was televised and drew 45 million viewers on NBC, and established pro football as an entertainment commodity to rival baseball. The NFL suddenly had a line of businessmen waiting to purchase new franchises in new markets, but most were arrogantly turned away. The NFL had no interest in expanding into new markets at the time. Lamar Hunt, the wealthy son of an oil tycoon who was watching the 1958 championship game, was one of those businessmen who wanted in the NFL. After being rejected, he began to recruit 7 businessmen from cities hungry for pro football to rival the former league. The resulting American Football League was publicly welcoming the NFL Commissioner Bert Bell, who said that competition would stimulate both leagues. However, the NFL did not sit idly and wait for the AFL to gain market share. Instead, it quickly expanded into Hunt's hometown of Dallas and into Minneapolis, another of the cities the AFL had designated for a franchise. The American Football League chose Oakland as a replacement for Minneapolis, as well as Los Angeles, Dallas for Hunt's franchise, which moved to Kansas City in 1962. New York, Buffalo, Boston, Denver, and Houston rounded out the original 8 AFL cities. The league piqued fan interest with an entertaining product on the field, high-flying aerial brand of football that contrasted with the stingy defense and running attacks of the older NFL. By 1962, the AFL had drawn 1 million fans to its games. In 1965, the AFL scored a television contract with NBC. That same year, New York Jets owner Sonny Werblin lured quarterback Joe Namath out of the University of Alabama to the AFL with the biggest contract in pro football history. The NFL's prediction and hope that the AFL would field only second-rate players and washed-up former NFL players was not to be. Instead, the 2 leagues began to compete over fans, players, and coaches. An unspoken agreement that one league would not sign the other league's players was broken in 1966, when the NFL's New York Giants signed place kicker Pete Gogolek away from the AFL's Buffalo Bills. Under the merger agreement announced on June 8, 1966, the new league would be called the NFL and split into the American Football Conference, AFC, and the National Football Conference, NFC. All 8 of the original AFL teams would be absorbed by the NFL. Now that the 2 leagues had merged, another challenge had arisen: how to determine a yearly championship and what to call the game. It would be determined the NFC/NFL conference winner would play the AFC/AFL conference winner in the final game of the season. Lamar Hunt, owner of the Kansas City Chiefs and mastermind in the formation and success of the former AFL, would coin the phrase Super Bowl for the championship matchup. Super Bowl I matched Lamar Hunt's AFC Kansas City Chiefs against the legendary Vince Lombardi and his NFC Green Bay Packers on January 15, 1967 in Los Angeles at Memorial Coliseum. Green Bay won the game 35-10, proving the NFC was superior. In Super Bowl III, however, Joe Namath and the AFC champion New York Jets upset the favored Baltimore Colts and ushered in a new era of greater parity between the 2 leagues. Currently, the NFC/NFL leads in Super Bowl wins with 26, while the AFC/AFL has won 25. For 2 cities and fan bases, the Super Bowl game is the ultimate experience. For the rest of us, it is a spectacular event we watch for entertainment. A huge draw to the Super Bowl is the halftime show. It's been equally viewed in recent years as the game. The halftime show of Super Bowl XLIX was viewed by 118.5 million, while the game itself peaked at 120.3 million. Prior to the early 1990s, the halftime show was based around a theme and featured university marching bands. The Grambling State University Marching Band has performed at the most Super Bowl halftime shows, featured in 6. Also, between the 60s to the 90s, drill teams and other performance ensembles such as Up With People appeared. But beginning in 1991, the halftime show began to feature pop music acts such as New Kids on the Block and Gloria Estefan. And in an effort to boost the prominence of the halftime show, to increase viewer interest, Super Bowl XXV2 featured a headlining performance by Michael Jackson. This year, the Super Bowl is expected to generate $331.8 million in network ad revenue. That's $74.8 million more than a 7-game World Series and $149.7 million more than the 3-game NCAA College Basketball Final Four. $11 billion is the total amount of money that people are expected to spend on this year's game between food, drinks, apparel, and other costs. Hotel rooms and plane tickets are a rarity during the host city's Super Bowl week. Hotel rooms can range from $1,900 to a whopping $4,250 at places like the Marriott. Airfare also costs a pretty penny. Flights can cost an upward of $12,000 round trip, depending on what part of the country a person's flying from. Super Bowl is the biggest one-day sports betting event of the year. Each year, over $90 million is wagered on the game. And over half of Americans surveyed admitted to having bet on the Super Bowl. 41% of men, 21% of women. So what exactly do these people bet on? Of course, there's the simple pick of who will win the game and take the over and under. But bets on the big game also range from who will win the Super Bowl MVP, who will win the coin toss, and what color will the Gatorade be that is dumped on the head of the winning coach. The intention of the NFL was to create a game that would draw millions of people to it for multiple reasons, and it has succeeded. Let me end by saying, we live in the land of opportunity, and the story of how the Super Bowl came to be is a story of the relentless entrepreneurial American spirit and vision that has made our country the best on the planet. I encourage you to follow your super dreams or super vision. I encourage you to write it down, make it plain, and go after it. Let us learn from such men like Lamar Hunt and recognize our desires can be reality. We can become part of something bigger than ourselves. I believe that was and is what made and continues to make the Super Bowl super. Thank you.